shop workers of Reddit. What is the dumbest thing a customer has brought in thinking they were going to strike it rich? Story 1 now is my time to shine. I'm a store manager at one of the busiest pawn shops in Northern California. And because of that, I have the high volume of customers that most don't, so that means lots of stories. One A guy brought in a stone painted green, claiming it was ancient gold, and that after eons it had developed a patina. I tried to explain to him that all gold is ancient gold made in something as intense as Dead Star colliding, but he insisted it was gold. After about 30 minutes of discussion, he forced me to test it, and when I showed him it wasn't gold, he told me he spent $4K buying it off some guy. 2. A guy brought in a bag of used syringes and wanted to trade it for a TV. I did not oblige. 3. A guy brought in a piece of safety glass from a windshield and claimed it was a diamond even when I assured him it wasn't. For someone brought in a clump of bent and slightly melted forks and spoons, claiming it was a meteorite fallen from the ISS trash dump shot into space. 5. Sumion brought in a costume cape, claiming it was the real invisibility cloak from Harry Potter. With further questioning, he didn't think it was a prop from the movie, but the actual magical cape. 6 is a watch guy. This is my favorite. Someone brought in a Rolex watch, claiming their father gave it to them. When I showed her that it actually said Rolflex and Skis, she claimed that those were misprints and meant it was worth more because of it. After I opened the watch to show her the movement, I saw that there was no movement at all, but just a weight in the back. 7. A couple came in with an old 1990-30 TV claiming that it was antique and refused to leave the store until we gained them $800 for it. We showed them selling online for literally a couple of dollars, but they refused and said they know what they had. 8. Not in line with crazy item, but a good story. A couple used to come in once a week and pawn stuff. Well, apparently one day the wife decided she was done with him as a husband, snuck up behind him in the store, sprayed him in the face with pepper spray, stole his car keys and his wallet, ran out of the store and stole his car. 9. Someone came in with an obviously recently used dialysis machine, still had blood sprayed on it like they ripped it away while it was in use, and tried to sell it for thousands of dollars. We passed. If you guys would like, I could do an AMA. If I get enough people interested, I would love to share more stories. Edit added, more edit 2 wow gold. Thank you, kind stranger. Story 2 had a guy try get 100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels 4-legged. About 5 years ago, I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSS. I told him we did. Then he asked the address to the store. I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. Story 3, a kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day, and we were all super impressed. In grade 12, he stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turns out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. Story 4, there was a buy-sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for $10. I used to go in and check prices on all games, and if I would make more than $10 from GameStop, I would buy the game, go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5 and take it back to the buy and sell to make more money. I was a heroin addict at the time, so that was my job when I wasn't working at the restaurant, and at my working. Story 5, comic book shop employee. Every single seller has a totally mint collection and a first appearance of Superman or Batman. There have been literally hundreds of Batman Superman ones printed over the years. Every time they reboot a series, it starts at issue 1. The people who were polite about it, I didn't mind. The people who thought we were trying to rip them off and that their books were priceless just did my head in. Story 6, I didn't work at a pawn shop, but secondhand movie, music, video game, comic, toy store in KC called Vintage Stock. Games, everyone knows this one. People would buy a game at GameStop and come in a couple of weeks later and expect us to give them 40 cash or 55 and trade in for 60 that tanked. Or people would try and sell us a 5-year-old Madden game and be insulted at the 25 trade and we offered for a game we knew was going to sit on our shelf. My favorite was the woman who bought 10 copies of FF7 Greatest Hits and thought we would pay $100 for each one. Sure, if you brought in Suikoden 2 or Lunar, we might offer you a nice chunk of change. But if it got a Greatest Hits release, not so much. Comics and toys, every father regretted not keeping his Action Comics one, and every mother lamented not having the original Barbie. But in the late 80s and 90s, they started mass-producing that. 15-year-old comics and toys have almost no value. Death of Superman and your 100 Beanie Babies are not worth our time. Sports paraphernalia, unless you can prove Joe Montana signed that football or George Brett signed that card, we can't take it. At least for what you were asking. The Brett Favre rookie card is neat, but why did you use it as a coaster for your coffee mug? A signed hockey stick. GTFO, this is Kansas City. We don't know what a hockey stick looks like. Movies and music in the early to mid-aughts when Netflix mailed you movies and Steam didn't exist, all media was physical. Or downloaded off Kazaa. That didn't mean we would give you $5 for every DVD and $3 for every CD. Nobody wants to buy Giannis' greatest hits, and we already have 16 copies of Spider-Man 2. Garage sale moms would come in with trash bags full of random and expect to make a living off of it. We would sort through so much over the summer because a bored stay-at-home mom thought giving the grandma down the block a check for $20 for every DVD at her sale would net her hundreds of dollars. The big secret, that shouldn't be a secret, is that secondhand stores are still in it to make a profit. If the Beckett Guide says your card is worth $30, we're not going to give you $30. If we can sell your shitty, scratch corn CD for $5, we're going to give you one. 50 cash and 3 trade-in if we are feeling very, very generous. That Star Wars figure might be worth $500, and you only want $300, but if it's going to sit in the display case for a decade, we won't buy it. We want to make money, and if there is no demand, we will lowball you enough that hopefully you leave. Since I left, I heard they went to a standard by trade value. But when I worked there, it was up to the manager, and the manager at the time kind of let the people who knew about the product determine the price. Yes, I massively undercut the obvious meth head woman who somehow found a copy of Risk for the PS1. Yes, I will buy a bulk bag of Magic cards because I knew that if we started to price them, they would discover the few ones that are actually worth something, but 95 of the time people that bitched about what we were offering sold us that's still sitting in a clearance bin. Story 7 worked at a traditional game store, had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic cards, thinking they're extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s, or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards are going to be ridiculously valuable. But no, I won't give you meth money for your Dark Magician. The level of disappointment, and oftentimes outright anger on their part, was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy, looking people who weren't store regulars that we didn't purchase cards. Did once have a guy bring in a collection that had a gnarly-looking Black Lotus. Gave him a good deal for it. Story 8, not a pawn shop worker. But this is still kind of a cool story, or at least I think either way. Both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antique shop and make a little money on the side. One day, I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for $25. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupy Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over to the shop and sold it for $45. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher, but hey, I made $44.75 a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about $125. Either way, I made money. And that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at $125. Story 9, not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Dude rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. Story 10, am a pawnbroker. Somebody brought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth, plucked from her ashes with the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. Story 11, a guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military-grade weapons. Story 12, I took an old 10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. Don't recall the year, but it was old. Guy says $10, show me what a bill would have to be like. Spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at old rare money. Edit change to rare. Story 13, a good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep a straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he's getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. Story 14, a friend's uncle allowed us to shadow him for a day at his pawn shop. A guy walked in with a metal lockbox and said he had something worth billions. He opened the lockbox, and there were chips in it and the smell of spray paint. He claimed they were leftovers of the cross Jesus was crucified on. He is descended from an ancient and noble line of knights who took oaths to protect the cross. He wanted $2,000 for the lockbox and chips. Story 15, I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid of over 10,000 people overnight, and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar, and am cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I'm looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes and try to pawn his guitar, hard case, and effects since the shop had a bunch. They offered him, evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100, and I took it. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got back on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now, unplayed for months. I hope everything worked out for him. Story 16, I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the everybody buys gold diamonds phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious CZ, which I tell the ringleader heh as soon as he hands it to me. One of the others demands, a touch annoyed, "How do you know?" In one of those excellent too rare moments of perfect reaction, I ask WHYD you bring it to me. Because you're a jeweler, oh. Story 17, as a worker in the ghetto, I get grills and gold teeth almost daily, straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept it and throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. Story 18, my mom owned the pawn shop in town, and she was a huge New Kids in the Block fan. Unfortunately, eBay decimated our business, and she couldn't afford to see their reunion concert. But her best friend from grade school could. She came in the next morning, wielding what she claimed was a condom full of Joey McIntyres. You could be the mom of a new kid. She won $1,000 for the stuff, but my mom told her friend to stick it up her vajayjay. Story 19, had a guy try selling me a gun. Before I could even nope him out of their shop is an NJ. We do not buy guns. He began to point the gun around with people all over the store, pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately, the gun wasn't loaded, but still. Story 20, I may be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, "I think this is gold, man." This particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was high on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, "I think it's a Chuck cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it." He just said, "Oh," and walked away. That was when I noticed he had his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. Story 21, I worked in a pawn shop for around 7 years or so. We had people trying to pawn fake jewelry all the time. The best part was when they didn't know it was fake. So many women left yelling about that cheap son of a... I can't even remember half the stupid we turned away. There was one thing that we didn't turn away, and we should have, though. And I love this story. One of the other employees took in what he described as a 24K gold baby bracelet. It was a ring, a golden ring. This employee was a bit of a know-it-all, and he liked to rub other people's mistakes in their faces. He eventually went on to become manager, and then district manager. And you can bet I made sure that every employee under him knew about the baby bracelet. He never lived that down. Story 22, pawn shops are not like that TV show. People don't bring in valuable antiques to be appraised. I would guess the most likely answer for real pawn shops is wedding rings that end up being fake. Story 23, I don't work at the pawn shop, but my friend does. People bring in dumb all the time to get a few dollars for dope. It starts from a candies box stolen from a shop next to the pawn shop to plungers, rubber ducks, electronics, real and fake jewelry they thought was real, and ending on cars. Story 24, I mean pretty much anything. People came in all the time thinking they could sell or pawn something for almost as much as they bought it new. Our policy was generally to buy for 25 of the new price, and only higher if it was an interesting or high-value item. I always hated jewelry because you just knew the person was going to get pissed at your lowball offer. I paid $10K for this at the jeweler's and hay-raced the receipt and insurance certificate. Unfortunately, we go by the weight of the gold, which is a fluctuating market price, and the size and quality of the diamond. Going by our rates, I can't offer more than 200, and I can't blame them for feeling insulted. It sucks because while some people pawn stuff to feed their drug habit, which sucks for them too, you know, many of them do it because their power is going to be shut off, or they can't afford food for their kids, or their husband's medical bills are slowly creeping up, and I haven't worn this ring for years. Who cares if my grandmother gave it to me? It's got to be worth thousands, or the 100 other reasons poverty blows. But you have to sit there and be stubborn because you're poor too, and your boss will deduct anything overpaid from your check. Pawn shops give you cool stories, but it crushes your soul. Story 25, I just have to say, I've only tried to sell something to a pawn shop once, some kind of CB radio setup and related components, and they offered me 20. When I told them that wasn't enough, they laughed at me and said I wouldn't get a better offer anywhere else. I ended up selling it on Craigslist for 300. Story 26, not a pawn shop worker, but I was in one with a friend of mine when a man who looked to have enjoyed more than just a few crack rocks in his day came inside with a sink that he apparently just ripped out of a hotel or kitchen of an abandoned house or something. And I do mean ripped out. No idea what he thought he would get for it, but the guy behind the counter told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to leave and take a sink with him. It was goddamn Hyler, edit. It was pretty Hyler. You just had to be there. Story 27, Babbage's, a.k.a. GameStop worker in the early 2000s. This was a case of the company being dumb. GameStop either owned or acquired Funkoland and a couple other game store brands at the time, Babbage's being among them. We had a local guy that would drive about an hour each way and buy out every single copy of certain NES games and then bring them to our store. He would do the same in reverse as well. The company would then dutifully redistribute the games to equalize inventory between the stores. All told, He made close to $50K before they figured it out and disallowed transactions of 10 games or more in one visit. Last I heard, this same guy was churning manufactured spending on gift cards, credit cards, etc. to the tune of 60 to 70K a year. Dude knows how to hustle. Story 28, I'm not a pawn shop owner, but when I was 10 or 11, I caught a black widow spider and excitedly brought it to the pawn shop in town inside a Mountain Dew bottle. Ready to claim my bounty, they weren't interested. Pet shop wouldn't take it either. I made a cardboard sign and stood on the side of the road, but I never found a buyer. Story 29, worked at a comic book and memorabilia store, and people have really messed up notions of value. Just because it is old doesn't mean it is valuable. Just because it is rare doesn't mean there's a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter brought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anyone. But you? Story 30, yay. I can answer this. I worked in a pawn shop in the Midwest for a year and a half. We had a very large woman bring in this bizarre-looking machine. She sets it on the counter and says, I want $500 for it. We're just staring at the machine and then looking at her. And finally, the pawnbroker goes, what is it, homemade breast pump? Yeah, this woman made her own breast pump and thought she would get $500 for it. So weird and gross. So many people trying to bring in their tattoo guns equipment. I don't know if other pawn shops take stuff like this, but any in my area is a hard pass due to bodily fluid, gross, and some of these people get pissed when you tell them no, screaming about how they spent $6,000 on this, and how can we not take it? We had this guy who would dig through garbage cans and try to bring us stuff to sell. Not uncommon, but it was very obvious that this was straight up from a dumpster, and he dug it out like 10 minutes before he walked in the store. One time we had to kick him out because he was losing his mind over the fact we wouldn't give him $15 for a desk lamp that had a broken bendy neck. Despite the fact the pawnbroker pulled up the exact lamp on Target's website selling for $10 not broken, this guy just did not get it and was calling us all in cunts over it. Dash, one of my favorites is the lady who called asking if we take books. We told her well-considered collector item books, but before we could explain, she got all excited and hung up saying that's exactly what she had. Now, when I say collector's items, I mean like first editions, or one of those special edition movie books, or whatever. This lady proceeds to come and ask for help carrying her 10. Yes, that's right, 10 totes of collector books. These collector books, 10-cent romance novels that you can buy in bulk from any thrift store. The conversation was the following. Pawnbroker, ma'am, these are not collector's items. We can't give you anything for them. Lady, what do you mean? They're collector's items. They're all from the same publisher and everything. Pawnbroker. Yeah, that's not what makes them collector's items. I'm sorry, we'll not take these items. You could consider donating them to a thrift store. Lady, are you kidding me? Do you know how many years I've spent cherishing these? They are collector's items. I am collector, and I collected these. Pawnbroker, I'm sorry, ma'am. Lady, I will not be leaving this store until I get at least $300 for my collection. We ended up having to call the police because she sat in the parking lot for 5 hours ranting and raving about us and how we're a scam. The last straw for my boss is when she opened the door and screamed at the top of her lungs like a 5-year-old and then slammed the door. Side note, my husband was the manager of said pawn shop, and that's how we met. He loves to tell people that he got his wife at the same place. He got his nice watch and TV a little. What an idiot. Story 31. I went to college in a farm town in northern Colorado. I had a red leather jacket that I bought in high school that I wanted to sell in one of the pawn shops out there. I never wore it and would rather have cash than the jacket. Didn't want money for drugs, just money because I was a broke college student. They refused to buy it because it was red and that color was somehow gang-related. I had no idea that Farmtown had any gang problems, but whatever. Story 32. I'm sure this will stay buried, but we combat a lot of people coming in with stupidly high asking prices by keeping an equivalent item in stock at a reasonable price. For example, the 1780 Austria silver thaler has Maria Theresa. If original, goes for a lot of money, but almost all of them are reproductions. The original dies were never destroyed and were used to make the reproductions. Therefore, they look exactly like the originals. One day, we had a father and son coming super excited. They finally hit the lotto. They show me their Austria thaler. I offered them a little bit shy of the silver content, which was 20 at the time, and the father got super pissed. He claimed we were trying to rip him off. That's understandable, I thought, because it was almost identical to the expensive version. So I tried to explain to him that there's hundreds of thousands of reproductions. He still didn't get it. His son did. So now his son, and I tried to get him to come around, and he wouldn't. That's when I went to the back room, pulled out a bucket with about 15 of the same type of thaler that he brought in, and told him if he thought they were worth thousands of dollars. I'd sell mine to him for 22 each. He never flinched and said, I'm not here to buy these. I'm here to sell mine. At that point, I just said we aren't buying those thalers anymore. Have a nice day. Story 33. I literally just had a lady walk out on me angry that I couldn't offer any money on her small wooden spice rack. It even had half-empty spices still on it. A few months ago, an old man came in with a trash bag full of used bongs, complete with weed and dripping with bong water. Said he's selling all his son's stuff. He was such a sweet old dude I felt bad and told him to break it all up in the dumpster outside and not ride around with it. I get a ton of old coins that people bring in thinking they're worth a bunch of money, and I usually have even older stuff in my change drawer that I can show them. Most people laugh about it. Also, I've seen quite a few gently used dildos in my time as well. Story 34. A month ago, man stole a lawnmower from the front of our store. Well, just 2 days ago, he returned to the shop with the exact same lawnmower. Claiming it was his, he tried to sell it to us. Not only did the serial number on that mower match the one we had, but it still had our price tag on the handle. Story 35. I used to work at a pawn shop in Los Angeles. One time this guy brought in 102 bills non-consecutive and wanted a loan of 120. My boss told me to do the loan, so I followed instruction and gave the guy 120. The guy then managed to not come back for the bills, so we made an 80 profit from sheer stupidity. Story 36. I worked in a pawn shop for a short time to help a friend and his family out. This lady came in and just wanted an appraisal on her engagement ring. She told us her boyfriend gave it to her and said it cost him $3,500, and she didn't believe him. So I took it to the back and checked it out. Fake through and through, just costume jewelry. I gave it back to the lady and told her it was fake. She stormed out screaming how she was going to kill that. I felt kind of bad for the guy. Hope he dodged that gold-digging bullet. Also, some guy came and wanted to sell some pieces of gold that still had bits of teeth stuck to them. Story 37, kind of the opposite, but in the mid-'80s I worked for a guy that ran food trailers that went to different festivals, etc. It was a blast of a summer job, but anyway, kids would dig around the house to find money to blow at the arcades and for food, rides, etc. Many of these kids would get into the coin collection, seeing a 10 or 20, but not resizing. They were silver certificates, silver quarters daily, Indian head pennies. Even had a guy pay for his drink with a roll of buffalo nickels. Story 38. Musical instruments. Sorry, your student flute from 1970 is tarnished and dented. Not to mention that the cost of replacing the pads and corks will be more than buying a brand new student flute. Keep it for the memories. They're worth more than your shitty flute. Story 39. 10 years EXP in running a pawn shop. Fake Rolex watches, family heirlooms, parking lot buys that turn out to be fake were the normal. Weirdest thing I've loaned on would be dentures. ID, give the guy 10 to 20. I was asked why I took them, and my response was always the same. If that wants to eat solid food again, hell, come get them. He always came and redeemed them. Story 40. I manage a pawn shop trading post in New Jersey and could tell you hundreds of stories related to this. But the dumbest thing I've had someone bring in was a used life, like it was something that you pay somewhere around $300 to $500 for. He was just completely flabbergasted that we would not buy it. Big purple glass. The guy said it was an antique. Story 41. Worked at an auction house rather than a pawn shop. But it's the same principle. I once had to deal with a woman who brought in a badly damaged, chipped, dog-child chewed, simple, pine bookcase. She informed me that she had paid $200 for the bookcase 10 years ago, and that due to its appreciating value, she expected to receive at least $1,000 for it now. She was very put out when I suggested the most she was going to get was $20, and only if someone wanted it for their shed. Story 42. My fiance works at a small-time retro gaming store and tells me stories all the time about getting people in and wanting to sell their copies of Madden 2006 for $30 because they saw it on eBay for that much. Probably once or twice a week she'll get a really cool item, but mostly it's trash that people dump off for their drug habit. Story 43. Obligatory, not a pawn shop, but my father was a coin dealer, gold and silver broker, and every now and then I would work for him to make extra cash, jewelry. Most people assume because they paid a lot of money for jewelry that it must be worth a lot intrinsically. Unfortunately, most jewelry has an intrinsic value of much less than what you paid for it, especially if you bought it in a high-end jewelry store. I realize that may not necessarily be dumb, but a lot of people come in with jewelry that they paid $5,000 for, and for some reason, and 2 years later, they think it's worth 10,000 coins. Many people assume because a coin is old that it must be worth a lot of money. Also, it's really amazing how many people think they have rare coins. A really common one was a lot of people claim to have a 1943 copper penny, even after having it explained that they are incredibly rare and basically nobody has one. I understand that a lot of people have a 1943 penny and don't understand that it's not the copper one, but a lot of people will actually say, no, I understand that, but I actually have one of the copper ones, and of course they never do. I also realize that having a coin that you think is worth a lot of money is not dumb necessarily. But the dumb part comes in when you explain to the person no, a 1945 quarter that he found in your pocket is not worth $500 or $1,000. And then they still try to argue with you. Story 44, when I worked at Guitar Center, we would have people come in to sell us used gear all the time, which was cool. Usually they didn't expect too much for it unless it was actually something good or rare or vintage. But people would hear that vintage guitars are worth good money and think I bet that Squire I got in 1997 that is all crusty and old is worth something, and get mad when we would offer them $35 for it and sell it for $70 because it was gross and somebody could buy a brand new one for $100 or $120 depending on if there was a sale on. My favorite was the one guy who came in with two garbage guitars. I think one of them might have been a bass that were missing strings and nuts and knobs. They weren't worth much even in good condition, but in the shape that they were in, it would cost more to get our in-house technician to repair them than he would get for them. Because we weren't in the business of buying broken instruments, we told him that if he wanted to sell them to us, he would have to have them repaired first. And I was completely upfront with him that the cost of the repairs would be more than we would pay him for the guitars. He decided to do it anyway, and gave me a big stink about how he drove a half hour to come here to do this and took an hour and a half out of his day, and how he felt like he should be compensated. When I called him the next day to tell him that the repairs were done and that we would be able to get him his money for the sale, he yelled at me over the phone for interrupting his golf game. This guy, I'm a local ill-buyer guy. I resell stuff. I've been doing it since I was 13. Everyone tells me that I should just open up a pawn shop about once a month, and especially since Pokemon Go has become popular, I have someone contact me about buying an ultra-rare Pokemon card worth like $2K. No matter what, I bring the cash and they show me the card, which is always a non-first edition Shadow Charizard in poor condition. Then I have to spend the next 45 minutes explaining to them why I want to buy their card and why it isn't worth $2,000. Also, I am extremely tired of explaining PSA grades to people. Another is the first appearance of Superman. What pisses me off the most is that it's a game of are you more stupid than I am from people who are trying to sell off their 1970s reprint of Action Comics 1. Also known as the first app of Superman, have already discovered it's a reprint. Those people just want to see if I would pay anything for it. I can generally tell if something is stolen within the first 20 seconds of the conversation. I bought probably 100 bikes for 20 just to see if they were reported stolen by the police and to return them. As for dumbest, and not just ignorant, last year I had someone try very hard to sell me a very old antique statue of a Japanese sumo. He said he had it appraised to be worth $30,000. To be fair, it was very cool looking. It looked familiar. I peel away some stuff on the bottom, and I see a date that is hard to read. I look it up and realize I'm looking at a child's well-made pottery project depicting E. Honda from Street Fighter. I legitimately wanted it for the story at this point and offered the guy $20 for it, which he declined because he knew what he had. Story 45, I work at a used bookstore and had a customer come in with very good condition DVDs, books, and CDs. Our old way of buying things used to be that we would judge every single object that came in based on condition and determine the price from there, usually around one if the book was in good condition. However, we now had a scanning system where we would scan a barcode and a price would be generated based on prices of it online, regardless of condition. Back to the customer, she's a scrawny old lady and looks pretty much like your stereotypical witch, but with a tank top and shorts. She comes into our store often and usually sells a few cartfuls of books and DVDs. With our old buyback system, her total would usually come out to around $70, a higher amount than most buybacks, and would sometimes throw a small fit if she didn't get enough. Now she comes in after we implement our new buyback system. She sells the usual cartfuls of books and DVDs in really good condition, but now her total came to around $17. And she flipped her. She asked, why do you have to use this piece of bullshit buyback system? Started calling us random slurs and insults. She also knocks her books down and calls us racist just because I'm white. You got to be racist against me. Why do I have this treatment? She demanded to talk to the manager. And he came. He told her that's just how it is now. You don't have to sell to us if you're not satisfied. He mentioned that the company had to change the system because we weren't buying books and stuff at an accurate price. Lady didn't want to take it and tried to shame us by telling everyone around her and the mall that we were racist against her and that she'll call the cops. She called the cops on us. But when they came, she instead got arrested for public disturbance and was subsequently banned from our store for some time.